The first time Evelyn saw the man in black, she thought the castle itself was afraid of him. Rain hammered against the cracked windows of Blackthorne Castle as Evelyn Carter dragged her suitcase through the front gates. The iron doors groaned behind her like something alive. She almost turned around right there. Almost. But almost didn't pay rent. The ad had promised free housing in exchange for cataloging books inside an abandoned private library 2 hours outside Boston. No experience required. Cash paid weekly. That alone felt suspicious. Still, Evelyn had been evicted 3 days ago. Her savings were gone, and the motel clerk downstairs had started looking at her with pity. So when the taxi driver refused to drive past the castle gates, she walked the last half mile through freezing rain with soaked sneakers and $47 left in her pocket. The castle rose above the cliffs like a dead king refusing burial. Tall towers disappeared into the fog. Hundreds of windows watched her approach, dark and empty. No lights, no sound, nothing except wind and rain. Evelyn tightened her coat and pushed open the massive front doors. Warm air rushed over her skin. She froze. Candles were already lit inside. Hundreds of them. Their flames flickered across endless marble floors and towering walls covered in portraits. The scent of old books and cedar drifted through the air. Someone lived here. You're late. The voice came from the staircase above her. Low, calm, ancient. Evelyn looked up and forgot how to breathe. The man standing there wore black from head to toe. Tall, pale, too pale. His dark hair curled slightly at the ends, brushing the collar of his coat. But it was his eyes that unsettled her. Deep crimson hidden beneath shadows like dying embers under ash. He descended slowly, one hand resting against the railing. Every movement felt controlled, measured, dangerous in a way her instincts couldn't explain. The storm delayed traffic, Evelyn said quietly. The man stopped inches away. Up close, he looked even less human somehow. Cold skin, sharp cheekbones, eyes that never blinked enough. You should not have come here, he said. Evelyn forced a nervous laugh. Little late for that. For 1 second, something shifted in his expression. Not amusement. Something sadder. Like she had just reminded him of someone he lost a very long time ago. Thunder shook the castle windows. The candles dimmed. And somewhere deep beneath the floorboards, Evelyn heard the sound of chains rattling in the dark. The chains rattled again sometime after midnight. Evelyn sat upright in the enormous bed, her pulse hammering as the sound echoed through the walls beneath her room. Not pipes. Not old plumbing. Chains. Slow. Heavy. Like something massive was shifting far below the castle. Rain streaked across the tall windows beside her bed. The storm had only grown worse since sunset. Every few seconds, lightning flashed across the cliffs outside, illuminating the black ocean crashing against the rocks hundreds of feet below. She should have slept. She had not eaten since noon, and exhaustion burned behind her eyes. But the sound below the floorboards kept pulling her awake. Drag. Clink. Silence. Then again, Evelyn slipped out of bed and wrapped herself in the thick wool blanket left on the chair beside the fireplace. Someone had already lit the fire before she arrived upstairs earlier. She had never seen Lucien do it. Somehow the flames simply appeared whenever he left a room. That thought should not have bothered her as much as it did. The hallway outside her bedroom was empty. Endless candlelight flickered across dark paintings and marble statues draped in shadows. The castle felt less abandoned at night. Worse somehow. Awake. Evelyn followed the sound downstairs barefoot, careful not to let the old wooden steps creak beneath her weight. The chain stopped the second she reached the main corridor. Silence swallowed the castle whole. Then she noticed the piano. Earlier, it had been covered beneath a white sheet in the corner of the ballroom. Now the sheet lay folded neatly beside it. Evelyn stepped closer slowly. Dust no longer covered the keys. Someone had cleaned it. One candle burned beside the bench. Warm wax dripped slowly down silver. She touched a key gently. The note echoed through the ballroom like a whisper. Another note answered. From somewhere behind her. Evelyn spun around. Lucien stood near the doorway, almost invisible in the dark. His black coat blended into the shadows so completely that only his pale face seemed real. You should not wander after midnight, he said quietly. Evelyn crossed her arms against the cold. And you should probably explain the chains under the castle. His expression did not change, but his eyes darkened slightly. Some doors are safer closed. Lightning flashed through the windows behind him. For one brief second, The entire room turned white, and Evelyn saw it. His reflection never appeared in the mirror beside the staircase. The light vanished. Darkness returned. Lucien stared at her silently. Then very slowly, he said, "You noticed." Evelyn felt the cold before Lucien moved. The ballroom air seemed to tighten around her lungs as he stepped closer to the piano, his crimson eyes fixed on the mirror beside the staircase. Or rather, on the empty space where his reflection should have been. "That is impossible," Evelyn whispered. Lucien gave a faint smile that never reached his eyes. "No," he said softly. "Only inconvenient." Thunder rolled above the castle. The candles flickered lower. Evelyn stared at the mirror again, hoping the storm had distorted the light somehow. But the glass reflected everything perfectly. The piano, the chandeliers, her own pale face frozen with fear. Everything except him. Lucien reached past her and lowered the piano lid carefully. His gloved fingers moved with unnatural precision. "You should go back to your room." Evelyn swallowed hard. "What are you?" Silence filled the ballroom, long enough for her heartbeat to become unbearable in her ears. Lucien turned toward the windows overlooking the cliffs. Rain lashed against the glass behind him, a mistake that survived too long. The answer should have frightened her more than it did. Instead, it made something inside her ache unexpectedly. Loneliness recognized loneliness. Lucien moved toward the fireplace, though his footsteps barely made a sound across the marble floor. "Most people leave this castle within the first hour," he said quietly. "You stayed." Evelyn folded the blanket tighter around herself. "The storm buried the road under 6 feet of snow. That is not the reason." His voice dropped lower, softer, more dangerous somehow. "You are curious." Evelyn hated that he was right. Every instinct told her to run. Yet standing there beneath the candlelight, watching shadows move across his pale face, she wanted answers more than safety. Another sharp rattle echoed somewhere beneath the floor, this time closer. Lucien's expression changed instantly. The warmth vanished from his eyes. He looked toward the hallway leading deeper into the castle. Listening. Evelyn heard it too now. Slow footsteps below them. Heavy. Deliberate. Her pulse jumped. "You said we were alone here." Lucien did not answer immediately. The silence itself became terrifying. Then he looked back at her with an expression so cold it made the room feel smaller. "Evelyn," he said carefully, "if you ever hear someone calling your name after midnight." Another step echoed beneath the floorboards. Closer now. Lucien's eyes burned dark crimson. "Do not answer." Evelyn did not sleep after that. She lay awake beneath heavy blankets while the storm clawed against the castle walls, replaying Lucien's warning over and over inside her mind. "Do not answer." The words should have sounded ridiculous. Instead, they settled into the room like something alive. At 3:17 in the morning, she heard it. "Evelyn." Her eyes snapped open instantly. The voice drifted softly through the darkness outside her bedroom door. Male. Calm. Familiar. "Lucien." She sat upright slowly, her pulse beginning to hammer. "Evelyn." This time the voice sounded farther down the hallway. Almost gentle. She threw the blankets aside and stepped onto the cold floor. Moonlight spilled faintly through the curtains, painting silver across the room. Another soft knock echoed from outside. 3 slow taps against the wood. Evelyn moved toward the door before she could stop herself. Every instinct told her not to open it. Yet curiosity pulled harder than fear. She reached for the handle carefully. Then she noticed something strange. No shadow beneath the door. Her breath caught. The candles in her room flickered violently. Another knock. Louder now. "Evelyn." The voice no longer sounded human. It stretched strangely at the edges, too slow, too deep. Like someone imitating Lucien without understanding how people truly spoke. Evelyn stumbled backward from the door. The handle began to turn slowly on its own. Her heart nearly stopped. Then suddenly the hallway outside exploded with movement. A loud crash echoed through the corridor, followed by the sharp sound of chains snapping tight. The voice vanished instantly. Silence swallowed the castle again. Evelyn pressed both hands over her mouth to stop herself from screaming. Heavy footsteps moved rapidly outside her room. Real footsteps this time. Fast. Controlled. The door swung open before she could react. Lucien stepped inside, his black coat soaked with rain and snow despite the locked windows. His crimson eyes searched the room instantly before landing on her. "Did it speak to you?" he asked sharply. Evelyn nodded once, unable to speak. Lucien closed his eyes briefly like a man losing a battle with himself. Then he crossed the room and slammed an ancient iron lock into place across the door she could have sworn had not been there before. His hands trembled slightly as he stepped back. That frightened her more than anything else. Lucien did not seem like a man who trembled. Another distant chain rattled beneath the castle. This time something answered from below. A low sound. Not human. Not animal. Lucien stared toward the floor beneath them. "It knows you are here now," he said quietly. Lucien did not leave her room until dawn. He stood beside the tall windows in complete silence while snow buried the cliffs outside under another foot of white. Evelyn remained sitting on the edge of the bed, unable to look away from him for too long. Every few minutes, the chains beneath the castle rattled again. Softer now. Waiting. The fire crackled between them. Neither of them touched it. "What was that thing outside my door?" Evelyn finally whispered. Lucien kept his eyes on the storm. "Something that should have remained buried." "That is not an answer. It is the only one you are getting tonight." His voice sounded exhausted, ancient exhaustion, like a man who had spent centuries carrying something too heavy to survive, but too dangerous to release. Evelyn studied him carefully in the dim firelight. For the first time since arriving at Blackthorne Castle, he looked less like a king and more like someone barely holding himself together. The shadows beneath his crimson eyes seemed darker now. His pale hands flexed once at his sides as another chain echoed far below. "You are afraid of it," she said quietly. Lucien laughed once under his breath. No warmth. No humor. "No, Evelyn." He turned toward her slowly. "I am afraid for you." The room fell silent again. Outside, the storm finally began to weaken. Thin gray light crept over the cliffs beyond the windows. Evelyn realized then that she had never once seen Lucien near daylight. The thought settled uneasily in her chest. "You still have not told me what you are," she said softly. Lucien stared at her for several long seconds. Then he stepped closer. Candlelight slid across his impossibly pale face. His eyes no longer looked entirely human in the fading dark. "If I tell you the truth," he said carefully, "you will never look at me the same way again." Evelyn should have looked away. Instead, she held his gaze. "Try me." Something flickered across his expression then. Pain, hope, hunger, all gone in an instant. Lucien lifted one gloved hand slowly toward her face before stopping inches away, like touching her required more restraint than she understood. His fingers trembled once before curling back into his palm. "You remind me of someone," he whispered. The confession barely reached her ears. Before Evelyn could answer, a loud crack thundered through the castle below them. Both of them froze instantly. Another chain snapped somewhere deep underground. Then came the sound she would remember for the rest of her life. A low voice rising from beneath the floorboards. Slow, patient, smiling somehow. "Lucien." The fire inside the room went out all at once. Darkness swallowed the castle whole. Darkness swallowed the room so completely that Evelyn could no longer see her own hands. The storm outside vanished into silence. Even the wind stopped breathing against the castle walls. Then she heard Lucien move. Fast. 1 second, he stood near the window. The next, he was directly in front of her. Cold hands gripped her shoulders carefully but firmly. "Do not speak," he whispered. His voice no longer sounded calm. Fear cut through every word. Another sound drifted upward from beneath the castle. Footsteps, slow and deliberate against stone. Coming closer. Evelyn's heartbeat pounded painfully in her ears as Lucien pulled her away from the bed toward the far side of the room. The darkness around him felt strange now. Alive somehow. Shadows curled unnaturally at his feet, like smoke. "Lucien." The voice below called again softly. "You cannot hide her forever." Evelyn stopped breathing. The thing beneath the castle knew about her. Lucien pushed open a narrow door hidden beside the fireplace. She had not even noticed it before. A secret passage. Cold air rushed out carrying the scent of ancient dust and cedar. "Go inside," he ordered quietly. Evelyn stared at him, not without an explanation. Crimson light flashed briefly in his eyes. Not anger. Desperation. "Evelyn, please." The word please sounded unnatural coming from him. Too human. Another heavy step echoed directly beneath the floorboards. The walls trembled slightly. Lucien looked toward the sound with pure hatred darkening his face. Then Evelyn noticed something horrifying. Thin cracks of silver light were spreading slowly across the floor beneath the door like veins beneath glass. Symbols. Ancient symbols glowing brighter with every passing second. Lucien cursed under his breath. The seal is failing. Evelyn looked at him sharply. What seal? He did not answer immediately. Instead, he removed one black glove slowly. For the first time, she saw his bare hand clearly. Pale skin covered with old silver scars running from his wrist to his fingertips like burned cracks through marble. Not human scars. 300 years ago, Lucien said quietly, I locked something beneath this castle. The voice below laughed softly then. Deep, patient, familiar somehow. Tell her the rest, brother. Evelyn felt ice flood her veins. Brother. Lucien's jaw tightened hard enough to crack stone. The glowing symbols spread faster across the floor now, illuminating the room in pale silver light. Dust drifted from the ceiling above them. Somewhere deep below, chains snapped one after another. Lucien looked back at Evelyn with an expression filled entirely with regret. I did not bring you here by accident, he admitted softly. Then the final chain broke. The castle shook hard enough to crack the chandelier above them. Glass rained across the marble floor as the silver symbols beneath Evelyn's feet shattered one by one. Lucien moved instantly, pulling her backward into the hidden passage behind the fireplace, just as a deafening roar echoed through the halls below. The secret door slammed shut behind them. Darkness swallowed everything. Evelyn stumbled against the stone wall, struggling to breathe as Lucien guided her deeper into the narrow tunnel. The passage twisted beneath the castle like veins beneath skin. Cold air rushed through ancient cracks in the walls carrying the scent of rain, ash, and something older she could not name. Lucien did not let go of her wrist. His hand felt colder now than ever before. Start talking, Evelyn demanded between breaths. Now. Lucien slowed but did not stop walking. Shadows moved strangely around him in the darkness, clinging too closely to his body. His name is Silas, he said quietly. He was once my brother. Evelyn felt her stomach tighten. Another violent tremor rolled through the castle above them. Dust scattered from the ceiling. What is he? Lucien looked ahead into the dark tunnel. The reason monsters exist. The answer settled heavily inside her chest. Lucien's voice dropped lower as they descended deeper underground. 3 centuries ago, Silas became obsessed with immortality. Not survival. Power. He wanted to remove every remaining piece of humanity from our kind. Another distant roar echoed through the stone around them. Closer now. Evelyn noticed Lucien's grip tighten slightly around her wrist. Fear. Real fear. You locked him beneath the castle? She asked. I tried. Lucien's expression darkened painfully. But there are prisons even monsters can escape. Eventually, the tunnel opened suddenly into a massive underground chamber lit by hundreds of candles. Evelyn stopped cold. Portraits covered every wall from floor to ceiling. Women painted across centuries in fading oils and charcoal sketches. Different dresses. Different decades. Yet every face looked hauntingly familiar. Her face. Evelyn stepped closer slowly, her pulse becoming unbearable. One portrait showed a woman standing beside Lucien beneath candlelight in clothing from another century. Same short golden hair. Same eyes. Same smile. No, she whispered. Lucien finally released her wrist. Regret filled his crimson eyes. I searched for you for a very long time. Evelyn turned toward him sharply. You do not even know me. That is the problem, he said softly. I do. The candles flickered violently all at once. A cold laugh echoed through the chamber from somewhere above them. Silas. Brother. The voice whispered through the stone. Did you really think bringing her back would save you this time? Lucien stepped protectively in front of Evelyn as every candle flame suddenly turned blood red. The red candlelight painted the chamber in shifting shadows as Evelyn stared at the portraits surrounding her. Dozens of women. Different centuries. Different lives. Yet every face carried pieces of her own. Her hands trembled as she stepped toward the oldest painting near the far wall. The canvas had darkened with age, but the woman beside Lucien still looked heartbreakingly alive. Golden hair cut just above her shoulders. Pale skin glowing beneath candlelight. One hand resting gently against Lucien's chest while he looked at her with an expression Evelyn had never seen before. Peace. Who was she? Evelyn whispered. Lucien did not answer immediately. The silence between them became unbearable. Finally, he said softly, her name was Eleanor. Evelyn looked back at him slowly. And she looked exactly like me. Pain flickered across his face so quickly she almost missed it. Yes. Another low tremor shook the chamber. Dust drifted from the ceiling as Silas laughed somewhere within the walls above them. The sound echoed unnaturally through the underground halls like the castle itself belonged to him now. Lucian stepped closer to the portrait without taking his eyes off Evelyn. 300 years ago, Eleanor was the only person who ever saw me as something other than a monster. His voice remained calm, but grief lived beneath every word. And because of me, she died. The final sentence barely reached her ears. Evelyn looked down at the small brass plaque beneath the painting. Eleanor Vale, 1724. Something cold moved through her chest. You think I am her? No, Lucian answered immediately. I know you are not. His crimson eyes softened slightly. That is what terrifies me. Evelyn frowned. Lucian moved toward another portrait farther down the wall. Then another. And another. Every woman resembled her somehow. Across centuries. Across generations. After Eleanor died, he said quietly, I kept finding faces that reminded me of her. Different women. Different lives. Every time, I stayed away. He looked back at Evelyn carefully. Until you. Before she could answer, every candle inside the chamber extinguished at once. Darkness crashed over them. Then came footsteps. Slow. Measured. Approaching from the far end of the room. Evelyn's pulse stopped. A tall figure emerged from the shadows beyond the portraits. Pale skin. Black hair. Crimson eyes identical to Lucian's. But where Lucian carried restraint, this man wore cruelty like elegance. Silas smiled faintly as he stepped into the dim red emergency glow spreading through the cracks in the stone walls. I was beginning to think you would never introduce us, he said smoothly. Evelyn felt Lucian move instantly in front of her. Protective. Dangerous. Ancient. Silas tilted his head slightly as he studied Evelyn's face. Then his smile widened slowly. Well, he murmured softly, this is going to end exactly the way it did last time. Lucian did not move away from Evelyn as Silas approached through the darkness. The underground chamber felt colder with every step his brother took. Candle smoke curled through the air like living shadows around him. Silas looked almost identical to Lucian at first glance. Same pale skin. Same crimson eyes. Same ancient stillness. But something about him felt wrong immediately. Empty. Like humanity had been carved out of him centuries ago and replaced with hunger. You should not have come back here, Lucian said coldly. Silas smiled faintly. And missed this reunion? His gaze shifted toward Evelyn again with unsettling fascination. She even carries the same expression. Evelyn felt her pulse hammering painfully as Silas stopped only a few feet away. The chamber walls trembled softly around them. Somewhere above, the storm still raged across the cliffs. You said she died because of you, Evelyn whispered to Lucian without looking away from Silas. That is not the full story, is it? Lucian's silence answered her first. Then Silas laughed quietly beneath his breath. No, he said smoothly. It is not. Lucian's jaw tightened hard. Enough. But Silas ignored him completely. 300 years ago, your precious Lucian made a choice. His crimson eyes darkened with amusement. Save the woman he loved, or save this kingdom? Evelyn slowly looked toward Lucian. Pain crossed his face like an old wound reopening. Lucian, I chose wrong, he said softly. The confession nearly broke something inside her. Silas stepped closer through the red emergency glow spreading across the chamber floor. He locked me beneath this castle to stop a war, he continued calmly. But by the time he succeeded, Eleanor was already dying. Lucian closed his eyes briefly. Do not say her name. Why? Silas asked lightly. Because the human finally realized what you are? The castle shook violently above them. Dust rained from the ceiling. More cracks split across the stone walls surrounding the chamber. Silas smiled wider. This place will not hold much longer, brother. Evelyn looked at Lucian carefully then. Really looked at him. The exhaustion in his eyes. The guilt he carried like chains around his soul. The way he still stood protectively in front of her despite everything. Monster. King. Prisoner. Lonely man. All at once. Lucian finally turned toward her slowly. Crimson eyes glowing softly in the dark. You should hate me, he whispered. Evelyn's chest tightened painfully. Maybe she should have been afraid. Maybe she should have run the moment she learned the truth. But standing there beneath the ruined castle with storms crashing above them, she realized something terrifying. She had already fallen in love with him. Silas watched the realization cross her face